Good morning, Rhonda. Good
Hey,
to speak with
Chris.
you. Uh, just for the sake of good order, I'm talking to Rhonda Ridge, who's the MD of Ab Initio Systems. I'm really wanting to talk about how far this system has gone over the last 20 years, because you started this back in the early 90s, or was it late 90s, Rhonda?
Early 90s.
And you were a finance director.
Hmm.
Uh, you were in installations yourself.
That's right.
What really got this going? What made you move into software?
Well, it was interesting, really, because as you say, I was working for as a financial controller for a window company, having come from other industries. And when I got there, there wasn't much in the way of systems. And so I sort of developed some paper systems just to try and get some sort of control and information about what was going on in the business. But what we really needed was software to integrate everything, really, and improve things. So the owner of the company and I, we actually travelled around the UK and visited quite a few companies to see what they were doing, to see whether there was a system already out there. We found very quickly that there wasn't. And so I set about writing. Early 90s, it was, Windows was only just, well, hadn't even really been released. So I wrote a very simple, basic DOS-based piece of software database. And then that obviously helped things enormously. But eventually, I left that company with the intention of developing something that could be used by all companies. But the company I've been working for obviously was my first customer.
I mean, can you give us an overview as to exactly what AdminBase does? Because from what I've seen of it, it's really doing everything for the installer, but it stops short, doesn't it, of actually passing through orders to a fabricator?
Well, that is actually possible with our latest mobile apps. But just to go back to what you first said about what does AdminBase do, basically it's what's been come to be called a CRM system. So it manages every aspect of a business from the original inquiry right the way through to the end of the service call and even beyond that. So for a window company, it's very specific and unique to them, because obviously in this industry there are a lot of processes that are not actually part of what other companies might do to process orders. There's the unique stages of quoting and then surveying and then ordering the products and then this guarantee. So basically, AdminBase gives a business owner control of everything in the business from beginning to end, really.
What was the take up like in those early days then? Because if it was kind of DOS based and not a huge use of computers, I suppose, that must have been quite difficult getting it off the ground.
Well, the DOS base was just the one for the company I worked for, but when I started developing it for other window companies, Windows had then become available. So I was developing for the Windows platform. Um, Take up in those days, obviously far, far slower. We were just starting out. But every new company that I sold AdminBase to, I would come away with almost like an A4 pad full of notes on what they wanted to see. When I first started writing, when I originally wrote it, it was focused on one company. So I went out to more companies, obviously I just took on board all their requirements and very quickly implemented them into AdminBase. So as things grew, then so the software grows, so it could cater for more and more people's businesses.
So what, people can virtually go in there and pick and choose the bits that they want, because presumably the software doesn't cover everything everybody wants, so they can say, right, I want that bit, I want this bit.
Yes, that is possible. I early on made the decision. A lot of software development, sometimes, especially in a vertical market, which is what this is called, will maybe do a version and then they'll take on a customer and they'll do a version for that customer and then they'll do another version for another customer. But I decided right at the beginning that that was going to be impractical, because that produces a support nightmare, because you've got to remember what's in everybody's version. So I just developed AdminBase so that, yes, it had all these extra features, but they could be customized, they were very flexible, and yes, indeed, you could use parts and not use parts. So AdminBase will actually work equally well for a company that does all commercial work or all trade work or all domestic work or a mix of the three. And also it's product independent. So it doesn't matter if actually this window company starts selling solar panels, AdminBase will work for them.
Oh, right. Okay. I mean, it must have changed hugely over the 20 years.
Completely.
I mean, can you give us an idea as to how much that has changed?
Well, there have been occasions where I've looked at somebody's very early version and I'm not sure I even recognised it myself. So, yeah, it's definitely very, very different now. And I've been very careful as I've gone through to make sure that it's still compatible so that somebody moving from the older version, moving to the new version, it's just seamless. They update and they get all the new features, and it's simple. So there's not like they suddenly have a piece of software that's completely unusable, or they can't then move to the new one because of how they're working in the old one. So that's an important part. We've very much responded to whatever people have asked for. So when I get a request for a particular feature, I then think very carefully about how that would affect all the other users. And I am careful to implement it in such a way that it's an enhancement for everybody.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you've made all these changes, I mean, back in the early 90s, I mean, SMS messaging and things.
Exactly.
You know,
didn't exist.
That didn't exist. So, but now you've brought that in there. So there's no built-in obsolescence then to the software.
None whatsoever. Definitely not.
So you can just literally carry on using that, and as new material comes in, new apps and things, they're there for you to use.
Yes, yeah. Obviously, some of those things might be a cost extra. Right. For example, with SMS, then we'd have to charge for the credits that are used. But yes, absolutely. The later versions of, well, in fact, SMS is something we've had in for a good many years now. And what happens is, having put in that core functionality, maybe somebody will request a different function as part of that. For example, recently somebody asked for the ability to see all of their text messages that were scheduled for the future, whereas previously we'd only shown them the ones that they'd already sent. Well, that was just something implemented within the software. So as soon as they updated, they got that extra feature.
I mean, is this just for the big boys? Is this sort of software for people with 150 operators or whatever? Or is it just as good for the man in the van?
Well, we've always had a good mix of companies using AdminBase. We've got customers that have got 150 users or more, down to single user companies. Often what we find is that the large companies that come to AdminBase have already got some sort of system in place. Very often they're using spreadsheets, and they need AdminBase to improve and speed up their whole process. So AdminBase needs to maybe produce some of those spreadsheets or the reports from those spreadsheets. But then small cap companies are very often happy to be guided by us, and they've maybe got nothing in place. So they will take on board the standard set of reporting and functions that we give them, that AdminBase comes with. But then what's quite nice is, as they progress in their use of AdminBase, they start realizing that, well, actually, it'd be quite useful if we could have this, we could have that. So what they're mainly delighted to find is that those things are already catered for in AdminBase, because it's the one system for everybody.
What about the training side of it? I mean, presumably it's very easy to use, but is there a training cycle for this?
Absolutely. We originally, when I first wrote AdminBase, we used to sell it outright to people, and then they'd purchase training on top of it. What we do now, and we've done for quite a number of years, is to produce it to provide it on a subscription basis. So people pay a monthly fee, and that includes everything. So if they need training, it's included. If they need reports writing, it's included. If they need support, it's included. So yeah, and what we tend to do is try and develop the implementation over a period of time. It's not possible to implement every part of the system, so we prefer to train people maybe at the beginning on just the beginning part. They then go away, they put that into practice, then they're ready to move on to the next stage. We give them more training. And then what happens also is very often people leave companies, new staff arrive, and they also have to be trained. So people on a subscription of AdminBase can be continually trained by us as their company changes and their needs change.
I mean, just for interest, I mean, how many licenses have you got out there?
Oh, over last time I looked, it was about 3,500.
And that's not people, that's licenses. So you could have of users, it could be tens of thousands, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, it's difficult to quantify, but a user is a person that has a login to AdminBase. Sometimes those logins are shared by more than one person. So yes, feasibly, that is true.
How do you keep up with technology? I mean, do you have to anticipate what the next thing is? I mean, it must move along as we suddenly got into smartphones. That must have changed what you were doing. Are you already anticipating what the next thing is?
Yes, we are. We are. It's very, sometimes it's our customers that let us know what the next thing is. Sometimes it's our own awareness of what's going on in IT and technology that makes us aware of how we could implement that into AdminBase and how we could actually give our customers the benefit of those new features. But yeah, definitely, we're constantly on the lookout, constantly developing, constantly adding new features.
And this last 2 years, obviously, with the pandemic, it must have been sort of meat and drink for you, really, because this has presumably helped people out in the field hugely.
Definitely, yeah. I think what's happened with COVID, it's an important shift for many, because obviously there's been this huge drive to work from home, but that's only viable if there's a system in place where team members can access easily from home their work. So although remote access to AdminBase has been possible for over 10 years, our recently released web version has just made that a bit easier for people. But the biggest barrier to working from home is the paper. So people might have had remote access to their PC, but that's not really going to help them if documents that they need are in paper files on desks somewhere and they're suddenly working from home. So as well as seeing new customers come on board and wanting to make use of all these sort of parts of AdminBase, we've also seen a great number of our existing customers realise that perhaps there are parts of AdminBase they haven't been using and get in touch with us. And we've sort of done a huge exercise of trying to make sure that everybody's aware of the features that have been in AdminBase for years, like scanning and uploading documents to a contract so that that information can be accessed easily by people working from home.
I mean, obviously, technophobes almost don't exist anymore, do they, really? I mean, we've all become them, even if we don't like to admit it. We all use computers and things. I mean, you've now put Google Maps in there as well, haven't you? I mean, where did that idea come from?
Good question. I'm just trying to remember. Something sparked it in my head one day that wouldn't it be good if we could use maps to show where installers are, to show where service engineers are, to show where salespeople are. And also, as technology has developed, a lot of these big companies have produced things called APIs that enable other software developers to hook into features that they have. So we'd already been using Google to link the AdminBase diary with a diary on a mobile device. And it just sort of came out of that, really. I suddenly thought one day, we should be able to do the same thing with the Google Maps. And we looked, we could. And so that's right. But it's interesting, isn't it, that sometimes a simple idea can be the biggest crowd pleaser of all. You know, we've had masses of customers that have just absolutely loved the fact that They can see where people are. It's so much easier to plan when to send a service engineer to fix a problem if you know when the service engineers are going to be in that area. Well, obviously you can look at the postcode, but that's quite hard. But visualizing it on the map is a different thing entirely.
So just to make it clear, the Google Maps thing, you can actually plot where all your staff are, for want of a better word, in different ways. Can you also then plot where your customers are?
Exactly, you can. Because another thing that window companies often get asked is, can I go and see another conservatory you've already built? So we have exactly the same feature, but for the customers' addresses. So they literally can put in whatever the product is that they're interested in, say a particular type of conservatory, that can then pull up a map of the customers where they've installed those conservatories. And what's even more amazing is that if that conservatory was installed some time ago, then you can sometimes even see the conservatory on the Google map.
Yes.
I know, it's amazing, isn't it?
Gosh, it has moved a long way since the early 90s.
Yeah.
But what about things like artificial intelligence? Are they all coming into this as well?
Well, I'm not sure about that. I think probably what most surveyors would like would be to be able to look at a window and something to tell them exactly what size it is. That would be good, wouldn't it?
Yes.
But I think we're constantly thinking about new. For us, the biggest new thing that we've just done is we're just introducing an Amazon style order update facility. So what this is the ability for a window company to provide update information to their customer directly out of the information that's in their AdminBase to a web page that the customer can log into any time of day or night and see the status of their order, make payments, confirm appointments, and then when it's all done and dusted, they can raise a service call. So, that's groundbreaking really for a lot of window companies, because to achieve that themselves, they'd have to get a web developer in, they then have to create some sort of interface between AdminBase and the website, but we've done it all for them.
That is brilliant.
Yeah. We're pretty pleased about it. Lots of our customers are very excited, and obviously people are coming to AdminBase purely for that, because they realise that the future of what we're doing is going to give them control and the visibility that they need and their customers need.
You do realise, don't you, Rhonda, that with this 20 years of experience and starting from scratch, you are the guru when it comes to these management systems?
That's very nice of you to say, Chris. Thank you. I really believe that in helping these companies, because sometimes we come across companies and they don't have any systems in place, and yet they're really successful. And we often say, they could do so much more if they had a system in place. So I'm always ready to listen to people's ideas. If somebody comes to me and says, could we do this? Could we do that? If it's going to make their life easier,